Hello, I am Rachel Smith, CEO of ExchangeWire, and I'm here at Cannes 2025 with Index Exchange CEO Andrew Casale and First Party Capital General Partner Kieran O'Kane, also ExchangeWire's co-founder. Hello, chaps.
Hello.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh no, I'm at your suite, so thanks for having me.
That's fair.
It's a sweet.
It's a
As
sweet
Ari
sweet.
Bakara would say.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
feeling Ari's
We'll
light.
take it.
straight out.
You don't have to pay them 10 grand, I can tell you that.
Thanks for joining me today. I wanted to chat through with the two of you a few key points about technology innovation and investment in the industry. Obviously, we're seeing a lot more innovation in ad tech over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. Kieran, First Party Capital, big investors in a lot of ad tech startups. Andrew, the architect of some original infrastructure ad tech, and also have made a recent investment in First Party Capital's fund. Yes. So I want to start with just hearing, I'm going to come to you first, Andrew. What's your view on where the industry is at the moment with respect to tech innovation? Do you feel like we're at a bit of a crossroads, moving into this modern world of marketing and advertising well beyond things like cookie deprecation, etc.? And is that sort of bleeding into new innovation in the industry and bringing sort of new technology solutions to the fore?
Yeah, like if you kind of look at where we're at right now in say the programmatic market, we're not operating in a market that's particularly young anymore.
Yeah.
We're 15 years-ish into programmatic. There's a lot about the market that works, but there's a lot about the market that also leaves a lot to be desired. There's a lot of room for improvement. And so I think to some degree, we're well on our way into a market that's now running into the train that is AI. And if you kind of couple that with the general sentiment that there's so much room to continue to innovate and add more value to grow the pie, I think this is potentially one of the greatest times ever to build a new ad tech company, because we now can potentially solve some of the fundamental systemic issues of the market at an accelerated pace to which we ever could have previously. At the same time, there's so much infrastructure that's been laid now that doesn't have to be kind of recreated over and over again to accelerate the pace of innovation. And so what's exciting to me right now is you've got a growing ecosystem of startups building AI-first companies in an environment that does need new innovation and need to solve some systemic challenges that can operate at a more accelerated pace than ever before. And so I'm pretty excited. And I also say, like, this is probably one of the best times to build a new ad tech company right now.
Yeah, that is super interesting because I think it leans in to a lot of what we hear from First Party Capital about the reasons that you started the fund, why you're trying to also get corporate investors engaged and involved in the fund. So maybe Kieran, talk us through your perspective on tech innovation from the point of view of seeing a lot of these new early stage tech startups that are coming into the industry at a point in time, as Andrew says, where the industry is maturing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of seismic shifts happening in the space. Andrew referred to the AI piece. That's one, search being disrupted. That's another. That's a massive seismic change that affects everything downstream. And then there's the stuff that's going on sort of in the open internet, right? That Index is heavily involved in. You look at it, not just browser-based stuff, but like out of home and CTV and audio. There's so much opportunity to build businesses in there, and some of them are kind of legacy channels, like out of home, for instance, right? It's a $50 billion channel, right? Yet there's been very little innovation around targeting measurement. We've seen some big acquisitions from T-Mobile this year around Vistar and Bliss and a couple other things they bought. So I think there is this massive shift, and you can see certain companies are becoming more and more like infrastructure platform businesses. Index is a really good example of that. I was just chatting to Laurie, who's the CMO of Index, lovely lady, top class woman. She was saying that, I was talking to her about, it feels to me that Index is it feels the Index are a bit like the old App Nexus when App Nexus came in the early days of programmatic. I don't want to make that comparison, but it feels there's a vibe shift within the business. And the companies are building on top of Index, and it's a reflection of where the industry is going. So Andrew's referred to the AI stuff. I think there's a huge opportunity around the algo piece, right? So, you're seeing great companies like Chalice and 50RNA and Cybers, which was bought by DV. New companies like Swim AI, who are a brilliant business as well. these are building these next generation sort of optimization layers on top of the infrastructure. And I just think there's a real sort of like opportunity to build brilliant businesses. And we set up FPC because we think there's a lot of brilliant businesses here in Europe and elsewhere, because we obviously have an investment in Brazil as well. And the basis of the fund was to kind of give these people smart money, right? Operators, myself and Kevin and Rich are from the industry. We love it. We eat, drink, and sleep ad tech, and we work with great founders. I hate to use that word, founders, but great people running business, ad tech people who are building fantastic sort of platforms and software to address big problems. So there's so like I totally concur with Andrew's view. This is such a great time to start in business space because there's so much chaos. AI stuff is super interesting because it's completely sort of making efficiency front and center of businesses. We're looking at WPP's shift, right? And even our friends up the road, MIQ's recent launch around their AI platform. But WPP is a good example, right? The open intelligence piece is about working with data companies, because I think signal has become the thing in ad tech. The shift from media to signal has been remarkable. And WPP Media have built open intelligence with the view of building an LLM, which then creates custom algos. And I think that's a shift that's been reflected across the industry and the type of businesses that come into the fore. So yeah, it's really exciting. I think the next sort of 10 years, we're going to see so much opportunity, but not just. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom, right? You know, the idea that ChatGPT and Perplexity are kind of like cratering referral traffic, but then that springs other opportunities. Like I think quality people will flock to quality, and I think premium publishers will do well as well. That's a lot there. Sorry.
Yeah, I could maybe build on a little bit of that as well. Like I think there's one fundamental change coming to this market, which is historically in ad tech, a lot of ad tech businesses looked very similar. They all built similar platforms and then they added some value. And if you look at a platform business, platforms shouldn't solve every problem. They should actually enable their customers and partners to solve problems. And I think that's the shift that's underway. Or like Index, for instance, we're not aiming to solve every problem in this market, but we are aiming to enable companies to do that. And we think that that's much more successful because we can avoid a lot of redundant capital investment that wasn't adding any value. It was very expensive to start an ad tech company, raise enough money to build a platform. And if you looked across the ecosystem, there was such a lack of differentiation because most of the core of these companies was exactly the same. The new chapter of company is going to be so different because they're not going to have to incur those costs and endure that friction. And then the second thing, back to AI, I think the thing that's most striking to me is when I talk to some of the new startups in the ecosystem and I hear them sort of account like the way they're building their businesses. I had two conversations yesterday here in Cannes. One with the founder who was talking about the fact that 40% of all code now built on the platform is agentic generated with things like Claude, which is just incredible to think of how fast that's changed the way a business builds itself. Another conversation I had with a more mature company a couple of years in mentioned that over the last 18 months, they've gone from shipping 1 feature a week to 6 by augmenting their engineering team without scaling dramatically with AI capabilities. So we are seeing a pace of build and innovation that's unprecedented compared to the historical precedent, which I do think lends itself very well to new startups doing incredible things really fast.
Yeah, 100%. And also, just as you were talking there, I was thinking to myself that, it's absolutely the case that we're coming into a maturing phase of the industry, right? And so I'd been thinking that things like, sort of competition and then consolidation and perhaps even regulation had been driving some of that maturity, right? Every industry goes through that phase. It's sort of the Wild West to start with. And then after a while, some legislators get involved and say, you can't do that. You should do it this way. Right. Maybe also, trade organizations and so forth corral and try to steer everyone in particular directions. And I was thinking to myself, maybe that had been driving some innovation and the pace of innovation, the idea that we can't do things the way that we used to 15 years ago. We've got to do things slightly differently. When you're building tech businesses for advertising and marketing, you've got to think about privacy first. You've got to think about, consented data, those sorts of things. But that coupled with the pace of technology enablement makes for a really serious wave of acceleration, right? And all of a sudden, you're starting to see people being able to do things much faster than they ever could before, and in much more innovative ways. Like you said, not needing to necessarily provide a platform that does everything, but instead looking for ways in which to enable other companies.
But I think that,
What do you, yeah, I was going, I was going to, but I was going to ask you, what do you look for when you're looking to invest in companies? Are you looking for that edge of innovation?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of AI businesses. I mean, like the three bingo awards this week are like AI, stealth startup, and agentic. And basically, if there was a drinking game in Cannes, the whole street would be drunk for like 7 days. There'd be fist fights and kebabs flying everywhere. Basically, it'd be a mess of lunacy.
I think you should do that with knowledge.
Yeah, but look, it's people who are addressing real big problems. There's still huge problems in this space, right? Like measurement still is a huge problem.
Yeah.
Targeting in a privacy first world is a big problem. And new channels appearing, like, you're talking about like the extension of the open internet, like everything's become connected to programmatic. Those are still huge issues, like, the likes of audio. Audio is massive, right? But it has fundamental problems that needs fixing. So we're looking at companies that are addressing problems. And sure, the AI can underpin a lot of it, but they have to be really attacking a problem. It just can't be an AI business. That doesn't make any sense at all, because you still have the simple problems of demand, right? Someone's got to give you money to run the campaigns or run the software. So those core principles of ad tech still apply. Just come back to the infrastructure thing. I think this is really interesting, because I think what Index have built is a layer for other companies to build on top of. I think like the big problems around cloud infrastructure, which is a huge cost for a lot of ad tech companies, the financial piece, the integration piece, and the actual tech platform to build on top of. I think that's shifted, and there's room and white space for new businesses. And I think
Is
that's
that what you're sometimes seeing when you're
Yeah.
looking at
I mean, like,
companies that you're investing in?
100%. And I think the investment from Index into FPC is a reflection of how our companies can work with companies like Index and build quicker and build faster and scale.
Yeah.
Because that's the killer for a lot of businesses, right? How do you get scale globally, right? And Index is a global business. So that's sort of where we see the opportunity. I mean, the fund has obviously got a wider lens as well. Like we're looking at, search, GPT, ChatGPT stuff, how that affects stuff. Signal is big for us, but all these businesses can still build on top of like the likes of Index. So yeah, I mean, we still think old principles apply, and we try not to get lost in the AI goop, because you can start throwing cash at everything, and it could be detrimental to your investors, like our LPs.
Don't throw cash at everything.
know,
But digging a bit more into the investment side of things, if I may, Andrew, what is, from Index's point of view, do you have a strategic approach to investing in the industry? Did you sort of look at first party capital and think, great, growing investment outside of the US even, because, these guys often talk about how hard it is to raise funds and get investment for European businesses. So just talk us through a little bit, maybe what kind of drove you to that strategy.
It's a combination of both. I think that the original fund as well and the investments made are just a testament to the team and sort of like the razor sharp focus on finding companies that are solving real problems that will add lasting, meaningful value. I've been in this business over 20 years, and so I've got a decent handle on that too. I think for me, the investment thesis is primarily, is this company trying to grow the pie? Because what I'm acutely aware of, and I think what our customers, media companies and publishers are aware of, is that we're at a sort of an interesting crossroads in general, which is the open internet has to fight for every dollar, sing for its supper, relative to the dollars that are going to the walled gardens. And so we have to grow the pie. We have to make the open internet more addressable, more performant, as quickly as humanly possible, or it will continue to wither away. And so companies that are trying to find ways to grow the pie, I think are the most interesting. And that's why, the custom bidding algorithm category that was mentioned, which is just a brand new category that's sort of been birthed over the last few years, it's very exciting because a lot of those companies are trying to solve a really interesting problem, which is how can we replicate some of the performance of, say, a PMax from Google or an Advantage Plus from Facebook, but do it across the open internet. So we're driving outcomes for marketers, we're driving ROI, we're selling product, and we're going to get their ad spend back. That's really interesting to us fundamentally. And I will say, the Europe in general, and a market that has had more privacy considerations and baked into startups, I think is also more durable and future-proof for where the winds are blowing. We are losing signal signal is no longer consistent everywhere. And so insofar as we have, super signal aggregation,
Hey.
we also have signal loss. And so there's ingenuity that we see here that is really, really special because, the cookie isn't uniform, it's not omni-channel, and signal in general is becoming more and more compromised. And so there's all kinds of really exciting work around cohorting audiences and doing things where you are devoid of signal, learning from past conversions to apply to wider swaths of audience to try to predict what might ultimately drive an outcome to a marketer. We're seeing a lot of that innovation here, which is exciting. And so that's part of the investment thesis as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, I've sat side by side with Kieran and Rich and Kev for about 4 years, listening to the woes of trying to raise money in a European investment scene, right? It's not easy. So it's super interesting.
But it
seeing
keeps you sharp, right? Like,
Yeah.
a lot of these companies are capital efficient, and when they do get money, they'll use it wisely and scale. And that's sort of where we're at. Like, we try to be sensible with the founders of these businesses and work with them, and obviously fund them, but also help them get the right connections, right? So the relationship with Index is interesting because we're able to kind of like fast track companies into the Index ecosystem. I think that's really important for us. Just going back on this, I think it's fascinating what's happened to ad tech. I'm sort of developing this thesis at the minute that we're moving away from.
I feel another mad tech sketch.
No. But it's not. It's a reflection of the mad tech sketch that I did last week. One of the big sort of LLM plus data plus activation. But I think that taking creative out of it, because creative still is important. I think creative will get evolved by AI, but there'll still be hugely creative people who actually come up with the ideas. That needs to be separated out, right? But the underlying tech, I think we're becoming less about media, more about data, right, and infrastructure, right? Like, so the data, it becomes absolutely paramount in this new world, right? Because if the LLMs become, the traders of the future, the data is becoming like the ultimate asset in the thing. And this gives rise to a lot of the new companies building on top of Index. We're seeing increasingly more businesses with a data asset building new business around curation, for instance, which is really, really interesting. You haven't seen it before. Like the rise of curation and this sort of like inflection between demand and supply is birthing new businesses that we've never seen before, and it's really interesting. And they fit into the new dynamic of the ecosystem. If you think what WPP is doing, or publicists that they walk the walk with data companies, and they want to work with curation. I think it's fascinating, and there's a lot of money made there.
Yeah. I'm going to wrap up with just 2 last questions, a different one to each of you. Andrew, what are you sort of most excited about from a tech innovation point of view? You've alluded to it already, but are there some particular solutions that you've got on your mind that you think this is going to be right?
I do think it is going to be like completing this whole loop of every tool a Facebook or Google can present to a marketer. I think we are on the fast track to replicating across the open internet, and the open internet's bigger. And I think if we can
And more quality.
Absolutely. We have more everything. And I think we're also more economical. So I think if we can complete the wheel, just imagine a future in the not too distant future. Imagine a future setting soon where we will have creative that will contextually be aware of the environment. It'll create itself on the fly to the brand standards that will be tailored appropriately, fed by previous conversions to ultimately drive outcomes. That will be incredibly performant, that will work across the greatest media environments in the world, including connected television, including the web, including app, including audio. That's a pretty exciting vision, and I think it is going to make the internet a growing destination for a swing back in ad spend that historically has been going the other way.
Yeah.
And I think we are democratizing the ability for tools and innovation to do that at an accelerated pace, because otherwise we were going to be requiring every platform to figure this out on their own and solve even more problems, which would have taken forever.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're unleashing right now.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm super excited.
Yeah. Kieran, if someone was considering investment in the fund
Just call me. Available for every time.
but it was 50-50, what would you be saying?
It was 50-50. Well, you'd be mad not to invest in our fund. Like, I mean, like if you want exposure to the rest of the world, I mean, look, we'll be evolving the US. The US is a big market, and our companies are working there as well. But I'm just talking about companies in, the rest of the world. There's so much opportunity, but you can't see it, right? So not every company has exposure. And I think the investment that Index made gives them early exposure to our businesses. And it's good for our business, good for Index. So there's huge upside for anybody investing. They get to see what's going on the bleeding edge. They get distribution. They get new customers. There's massive upside. And it's like you're investing in the future of independent ad tech. And really, that's what we're talking about here, right? Because we don't want fucking Google and Meta owning the entire pie. Sorry about that. I just dropped an F-bomb. You want a fair and democratized, distribution of money, and independent ad tech does that. And so it is a bet on the future of independent ad tech.
Yeah, fantastic. And from an ExchangeWire point of view, it's super exciting to see the industry kind of go through this phase. Like I said, there was some contraction a few years ago. Now we're starting to see much more of a widening out and an opening out of a whole range of tech tools and solutions. So it's a good time to be in ad tech.
It's a great time. Join the fund.
Yeah.
Come on in, the water is nice.
Andrew, Ciarán, thanks very much. Thanks for watching.